Hi friends, my name is Maria Serra and I am an immigration attorney in Miami, Florida, and I wanted to share with you some things that are happening in the detention centers and with the courts, and hopefully something good is going to happen for us immigration attorneys and our clients. So first I want to talk to you about what's happening to people in detention centers, and then later we can talk about what the American Civil Liberties Union is doing. First, from personal experience, I can tell you that one of the issues that people are having, that I'm having, is the jurisdictional issues. So I have an individual who was detained by Customs and Border Patrol in Texas, no criminal record, entered the U.S. legally, isn't overstay, wasn't driving, was a passenger in a vehicle. Vehicle was stopped. The driver of the vehicle had a driver's license. There was no reason to stop the car except that the people in the car looked like they were immigrants. And she is in a detention center. She was detained by a Customs and Border Patrol, but now they're saying that she's not in their custody, that she's under the custody of ICE, but ICE is saying that she's not in their custody. Now, she's called me from an ICE detention center, so she is in the custody of ICE. In the detention center where she's located, she says all they give her is bread all day and I think an apple. She's eating the apple. She says the bread is making her sick. She has diarrhea. She can't sleep. The conditions are really bad in that particular detention center. As you guys know, I go to Chrome. I go to BTC. Chrome has had also crowding issues where my clients have been sleeping on the floor. There's, tons of men, very limited bathroom space. We're sleeping in the bathrooms next to the urinals. It's really not a good situation. The crowding and also the lack of access to, quality food. These are individuals, most of whom have not committed any crimes other than being here undocumented, but they're really treated like the worst of the worst. And now you've heard in the news other things that have happened. I have not witnessed that level of abuse, but I can tell you that friends of mine that are immigration attorneys have had their clients who are in what this administration is calling alligator Alcatraz abused. What are some of the abuses that are happening there? Well, the first one is attorneys are not allowed to meet with their clients, and that's an abuse in of itself because that is a violation of due process. The other issue is that no one wants to accept jurisdiction over these detainees, so they don't get a right to a bond hearing because no one wants to accept jurisdiction. Most recently, one of the attorneys in our attorney group was able to get bond for one of their detainees out of Chrome. So hopefully things are starting to change. But right now, for weeks on end, there have been situations where attorneys have gone to see their clients and they haven't been allowed to see them. We can't find them in the system that ICE uses. So it's really complicated to determine where your client is. The other thing is that in the Alligator Alcatraz Detention Center, people are being shipped off to their homes, to their home country or whatever country they're being sent off to without the attorneys being notified, even though they have an attorney representing them. They're also being sent without being allowed to even reach out to a family member. So you can imagine if your loved one is there and then they're sent to Mexico overnight, well, how are you going to be able to connect with them when they're in Mexico, or at least have someone there in Mexico or whatever the country is to pick them up? I mean, this is crazy what's happening. Recently, one of the attorneys in our group had her client was going to be shipped off. They had a group of detainees outside of the Alligator Alley Detention Center. It was raining. They sat out there for, quite some time getting wet. The plane never showed up. They were then, ultimately allowed to come back in and eat breakfast. But in the meantime, one of the detainees, which was her client, wanted to call a family member and let them know what was happening. They didn't want him to have access to calling a family member, but after a lot of repeated requests, they allowed him to call a family member. And then subsequently, one of the deportation officers was really angry with him and said that if she had a gun, she would have shot him. So this is what's happening. These people are not well trained. They are abusive. And they are themselves frustrated. I'm not justifying it. I'm just telling you that I can imagine the conditions there, both for the detainee and for the people that work there, are unpleasant. And frankly, it's a human rights violation. I know that we're at a place in the United States where people think that immigrants are not humans and therefore it's okay to threaten to shoot them in the head because they want to call a family member, or it's okay not to give them food and water because, it's a punishment for, I don't know, complaining, or maybe for not wanting to work on a day where you're being asked to work, even though, the detainees that are there are not supposed to be employees of these detention centers, which, by the way, most of them are privately owned. For those of you who don't know, most of the immigration detention centers are owned by two companies. One is Core Civic and one is Geo Group, and both of them donate to government PACs, political action committees. So there's a lot of money circulating around detention centers. It's a business, just like the prison system is a business. And people should be able to have access to an attorney in all of those circumstances, because as far as I know, we still have a constitution, and the constitution guarantees due process for everyone. I know that this administration and people who are aligned with it would love to see immigrants have zero due process, but that's not how it works. As an immigration attorney, I will continue to fight for my clients and to speak up against these abuses, and I hope that you guys will too. One of the good things that's happening, and I'm going to end on a good note, is that tomorrow there's going to be a hearing. Now, the hearing is related to a lawsuit that was filed by the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, and Americans for Immigrant Justice, and it's regarding the conditions in Chrome and the conditions in Alligator Alcatraz, basically saying that, all of the things that we've been talking about, the abuses, the conditions, and the lack of access to legal counsel, at least in Alligator Alcatraz. So please pay attention to what's happening in the news and share this information. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and take care.